everyone. This is Robert Rutherford. We're at episode 37, and we have Albert Carrillo in here, the CEO of the Western Walls and Ceilings Contractors Association, otherwise known as Wwcca. Albert, thanks for coming in, bud.
Hey, Rob, thanks for the invite. I
appreciate it. Yeah. Thanks for taking some time out of your schedule.
Yeah.
And coming in to tell your story. So how's everything going?
It's going as good as it can. COVID, it's everywhere, but the guys are busy, so we're busy. We're
Good.
Trying to invent new ways to do stuff. Yeah, busy.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. It hasn't, it's really strange how construction has just remained busy through all of this stuff. It really, I mean, we've been having record sales.
I know. We've been having record hours, and these. My hat's off to these contractors. They find a way to be safe, change their rules. Do whatever they have to do to keep their guys working. I commend them.
Sure. A lot of the trades in our industry, it's not like these guys are working on top of each other at, even before this. You want to kind of keep them separated anyway so that they're getting production. And it's riding up in the man lifts, getting up to the floors where they need to work, elevators and so forth. That's what makes it probably a lot more difficult for those guys.
Yeah, that's what we've heard is getting back and forth, taking breaks. They have to take them on the floors. They can't sit together. But, one advantage of this whole thing is the trade stacking has diminished. So
sure.
It was a big problem for a lot of years. Everybody's on top of one another, and now they can't be. So these guys, even though they have to limit the amount of manpower there and make these accommodations, they're making up for part of it through the lack of trade stacking, so they can get their job done. There's nobody in their way. So
the way it's supposed to be.
Well, yeah.
For the sequencing.
Exactly.
There has to be a little more planning on the general contractor's side to be able to make that happen, so that you're not getting these guys next to each other, for sure. As
it should be. But unfortunately, and I've heard this time and time again, it doesn't shorten the timeline that they want the build done.
Of course. Exactly.
Yeah.
So, Albert, you worked in the field for a number of years. Tell us your story about how you got in and what you were doing.
So, right out of high school, my dad was a teacher. My mom's a nurse. They're both college graduates. And so my path was college. So I wanted to go into service out of high school. And Dad says, no, go to school and get a degree, then go into the service, come out as an officer. I go, okay. So I go to college. I was going to be a lawyer. I figured, hey, that's the best way to make a lot of money.
Sure.
So here I am in college, just I didn't get a degree. I didn't get any money. I paid for it myself. My dad couldn't afford to put me through college. So I'm slugging away in college. And my younger brother got a job during the summers. He started college too, and he started working as a gun hottie in Tucson. And I'm like, what's a gun hottie? He goes, we go out there and we feed a bunch of sand and cement into this pump and pump it on the wall, pumping stucco. I go, what's stucco? I didn't know anything. We didn't have a construction background.
That's amazing.
Like zero. So anyway, he's doing that. He gets my best friend into it, my other best friend, two guys I was hanging out with. And so they're all working construction, and I'm holding the line for my college degree and working full-time, going to school full-time, and just killing myself. I was not happy at all. So finally, after roughly 4.5 years of trying to do the college thing, my buddy goes, I need a guy. He goes, I come and work for me. I'll pay you $7 an hour. And I'm like, I did some quick math. Whoa, that's a raise. So I was basically out of college. I hadn't been going to school. I was ditching a lot. I didn't like the job I was at as managing an auto parts store. I said, sure, I'm in. So there I go. First day on the job, he walks me up. Now I've been working a little side work on the time, doing some floating, doing some cleanup for my buddies, did little side jobs that they had. But this was my first real career in construction. So I roll on this job site. They walk me up to this sand pile and they said, that's a mixer. This is a sand pile. This is your cement and lime. This is a hod. This is a hod stand. This is your wheelbarrow. We're working on the roof today. I thought, okay, cool. Taught me how to mix. Taught me how to load a hod, taught me how to carry a hod, walk up the ladder and dump it onto a mudboard. And that's what began my career, that very thing. And I did that for quite a while, actually. Got real good at it.
The hardest job in plastering.
I didn't know any better.
I mean, that is tough work.
It
man.
was hard work, I tell you. But I was so fit. It was
Yeah.
amazing. Just amazing.
Well, it probably weighed more than you did
Yeah.
when it was full.
I weighed about 130, 140 pounds back
Yeah.
then. I was
That's
a
tough.
rail.
That is tough.
Yeah.
And your brother was working with you at the time?
So we never did work together. He was working for a separate company, and then I worked for another company with my best friend. And my other best friend was up in Phoenix working. So we're down in Tucson working.
Okay.
And so I get in, I start working, and we get this job up in Lake Powell at Bullhead City.
Mm-hmm.
And they have it's called Wawweep Lodge. It's right there on the Arizona side. And they had an existing building and one hotel, and they wanted to build 2 more hotels and a new restaurant. And so, they had 3 existing hotels. So we went up there and we redid the existing, stuccoed the new ones, and then did the restaurant. But the 3 existing were done by hand. So we ran that all, me and another hottie.
Mm-hmm.
And we carried the whole re-stucco for those 3 buildings project. On the next 3, we got into pumping. And that's when I started learning how to feed a gun.
Got it. Trying to keep up with the gun.
Yeah, it was hard at first.
Yeah.
But there's some techniques you learn, like
Yep.
and I tell guys, never feed sand from the top of a sand pile. You'll kill yourself. You gotta start at the bottom, feed it up, and let the sand fall to you, and you're going minimize your movements.
Yep.
Over here to the cement, right over here to the lime. They're close together. We used to cut our bags in half of lime, so that half a sack. It's easier to carry. Sometimes
Sure.
I do the cement too.
Yeah.
Depending how fast we were going at the time.
Sure.
But the sand is the key because there's so much of it. By the
Yes.
tons. We're
Yes.
shoveling tons a day.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. It's you show up and it's a full pile, and at the end of the day,
Wait until lunchtime. Then you get your second pile.
yeah. Right. Wow.
Yeah, it was
That's-
just brutal.
That is brutal, and a lot of summertime work.
A lot of it.
Even worse. Even worse.
It was in the heat. So the hottie had to show up a half hour early because they wanted mud at the end of the hose when the blasters got there.
Sure.
The elites.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we had it done. We just had it done. We were there at dark 30.
Mm-hmm.
And then summertime, it's 4:30 in the morning. We're pumping by 5, just enough sunlight just to see what you're doing.
Sure.
And we're done by 12, 1 o'clock. Get out of the heat.
Sure. Sure.
Do whatever it is you do
Yeah.
afterwards.
That's a whole different style when you're working in the desert.
It's very different. Yeah, we just a lot of little tricks we picked up.
Mm-hmm.
The hose would get hot, so we'd take cement bags and drape it over the hose that's in the sun and keep the cement bags wet.
Mm-hmm.
And so the slight breeze or whatever would help keep the hose cool.
Sure.
Just working in shade. I told them I was burning up out there standing in the sun, so I told them, let me get some scaffolding. I want to build my own I called it a hottie shack.
Mm-hmm.
Let me build my own little hottie shack. It won't interfere with anything I do, but I just got to keep that sun off my head. So I got some scaffold and erected it over me and put in the plank and all that.
Yeah.
And with that cool sand, the wet sand down there, it was just enough to lower the temperature a few degrees just to keep you from baking.
Sure.
Keep the head kind of the brain working in the heat.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
little things, just little things that we did.
Did you ever graduate to the gun where you were running the nozzle?
Yeah. So I went from feeding the gun. So then I ended up working on. I traveled a bunch. I went job to job to job. Jobs just rolled quickly. So I want to add. There was no union in Arizona. Back when I got into this, the union had just gotten out of the state. They had no members. There were no unions there, especially in the plasters union. But there was a lot of old timers that were ex-union guys. And so they were still working. And I had the benefit of working under them. I went through an apprenticeship program without being an official sanctioned apprenticeship program, just by working with the old guys.
Sure.
I worked hard. They liked me. I wanted to get on that wall. That was my goal, right? I got to get on the wall. So I'm feeding gun. I tell them, man, I want to get on the wall. I want to get on the wall. And they says, well, you got to find a hottie and train him to replace you. And as soon as you do that, we'll put you on the wall. He goes, but there's one thing. If that guy doesn't make it in the sand pile, you're going back to the sand pile. So train him good and get a good guy. So I did that. Found a guy. Got him going on the gun. And I go to the wall and I start floating. And so I'm floating, just floating and scraping, floating through code, cutting back, doing all kinds of stuff. The guys liked me, so the guys that knew I worked hard, asked me to come and finish on the finish crew with them. So I got to start sand finishing pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And that was a lesson in itself. Just you see the mud going through, you see it all wet, and you see it put on the wall till you're actually moving that stuff around. You don't figure out things right away. And so, just killing myself trying to keep up. And again, learning little techniques to shortcut your time, the movements, all that stuff.
Sure.
Keeping your water bucket next to you, not slamming the sponge float so it bends so that you can float a good float, because you want the fewest strokes on the wall that you can.
Sure.
Keeping up with your spread guy, knowing when to trim, just little things.
Sure.
And I got to doing that. And I spent probably a good year and a half on a project in Phoenix, Arizona, up in Scottsdale, just floating sand finish, lids, walls, just the whole 9 yards. It was a blast. It was a blast.
Yeah, well, that was good training for you.
Yeah.
To be able to have a job that size and
it was big.
Learn all those tricks.
It was big.
Yeah.
So I went floating hard brown coat to doing that. And then I got to Derby after that, my next job. I started out on a scratch Derby. Just a big, big old scratch Derby, and chasing the gun with that. It was a good lesson in learning how to move that thing and how mud behaved on a 3-foot wide swath that you would take. You got your little trimmer, your little brush, and your Derby. And so I learned that, and then I moved up into Derbying the brown coat.
Got it.
And then one day the nozzle man didn't show up. And so I says, give me that thing. So I nozzled a little bit, but not a whole lot. I just kind of filled in for him, was learning the nozzle. And everybody played with me, kinking the air hose so it stops the air, so you freak out, think you got to pack. There's little games everybody plays.
Yeah. For sure.
The rite of passage.
That's all part of it,
Yeah, such good times. And then I went back, so that was all up in Phoenix, where I did a lot of my learning and growing. Most of it in Phoenix. Then I moved back to Tucson. Kind of went in, but there's only 90 miles difference between the two cities. So I'm back in Tucson and getting ready to get married, and I got this job opportunity spraying fireproofing on this tall high-rise in the center of town. And I go, I've never sprayed fireproofing, but the guy who was trying to hire me says, hey, you got a good reputation. You're a hard worker. You show up every day. I guess that's a thing.
Well, it's huge.
A desired thing. I don't know.
It is today.
Yeah, still today.
Yeah.
So I took the job, and it was me and the other guy, and we had a hottie and we had a hose puller, and that's it. That was our entire crew. And so for a year and a half, we spent on this building fireproofing, and that's where I honed my nozzling skills. I loved it. I took to it, and I absolutely loved it. I could just stand there for hours, and he goes, my turn. I go, let me get to the end here.
Yeah.
And the guy was like, okay, cool. So it was so much fun, and then we had the little depth gauges that we'd have to do. And so, so that's where I learned how to nozzle, and finally tune it. And I was pretty proud of my nozzling.
That's actually a good place to learn, because it's not a critical finish.
No, it's not.
It's a critical depth,
Correct.
that you're kind of guessing at the depth, right?
You kind of are. And after a while, you can kind of guess to, once you lay the proper depth, then the rest of it just kind of feathers around to that same depth. And, and you check yourself once in a while. And, but yeah, it was really good. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the movement, the up and down, and I want to add that being in the trade, it kind of fulfilled my vagabond nature. I like new things. I like being creative. I like advancing. I like doing new stuff. And you know how it is in the trades, man. No 2 days are the same.
Nope. No.
You could be on the same job in the same floor doing the same thing.
Yep.
It's a very different day.
It is.
And I love that. That played right into my psyche. I don't know how to.
Well, that's kind of that's the nice thing about construction, is it is different every day, and you're working with different people all the time, and it's
some great people.
Yeah, and the other thing is too is it's not just the same thing every day. You know, you could be working the nozzle one day and then you could be floating the next day, and then you could be finishing a couple of days later. You know, spreading the finish on.
Exactly how it went.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that keeps it interesting.
And the new jobs and the new challenges, and that's just as a worker. It was good. That fireproofing job set me in my career. I think it was a set for me. I said, you know what, I can do this. And then I started setting my goals. Okay, now I need to be a foreman and then a superintendent, and I'd eventually like to own my own company. And I did get there, but so after Arizona, it got slow. Had to go. I went up to California, did some piecework lath, worked on some housing stuff up near Vacaville, up in that area.
Northern Cal?
Yeah, Northern Cal. Came back to Arizona, and work was still slow. This is 80s, somewhere around there, mid-80s. And my brother, in the meantime, had moved. So he went to Socorro Tech, Danny, and he graduated. He has a petroleum engineering degree.
Oh, wow.
And ended up as a plaster. He never...
What the hell happened to you guys?
Well,
I mean, you were going to be an attorney,
I
and
know.
chemical engineer, you know.
That's how valuable and how lucrative this trade is. I just want to say.
All right,
It just filled the need in here of doing whatever it is, just the path that we took, you know. And the younger brother, he didn't go to college, but he's in the trade tube.
Is that right? Wow.
Yeah. So Danny was over there working, and he says, hey, bro, I need a foreman here bad. He goes out here, they set up one section of scaffold and they move it around the house. He goes, I'm setting the whole house and people love it. And he goes, I got too much work. I need help. I need you to run a crew. I run a crew. So I said, okay, I'm there. So I picked up my family. We moved to Albuquerque.
Oh,
and
wow.
we actually lived in Rio Rancho, but I spent 18 years temporarily living there. I loved the state. It was an okay place to be, but I stayed there just because the kids were real young, just starting into school.
Right.
And throughout that, they both graduated high school from New Mexico. So we stayed at least 12 of those years. I told them I wouldn't move them around in schools, but as soon as you graduate, we're out of here.
Got it.
So then I went there and did a lot of work for him. And that's when I started running crews and being a foreman for larger crews. I had done a few small jobs down in Tucson as a foreman. I finally did make that, but over there's where I kind of was helping him run the company for a guy.
Got it. And this was all residential?
Residential and commercial.
Okay.
And a lot of eifs. So I got to back up just a little bit. Back in Arizona, I got introduced to eifs. Everybody calls it eifs. I think you know that's like nails on a chalkboard for me. Eifs is the proper acronym terminology. Anyway, I get into eifs, and that's really cool, lightweight, easy to do. Kind of did that for a while. So when I went over to New Mexico, they were starting this new finish. Stowe had just bought this acrylic. We're doing acrylic finish over stucco. And Stowe was trying to get into this market, and they had this new invention called elastomeric finish. And they knew I knew how to do eifs, floating and spreading the finish. And so my brother says, hey, let's start doing this on our projects. Let's start putting this acrylic finish on these projects. And so it was easy.
Sure.
You brown it, you float it hard, because we always floated our brown coat. We never we always floated it with a hard float. Not a sponge float, not a scrape, not nothing. Always a hard float. So we had a nice level finish for the brown coat. So we started doing acrylic finish. We would prime it and then do the finish. And we found out that the primers that the eifs manufacturers had at the time were very heavy in viscosity. So when you start doing your finish on the light finishes, it would just kind of move around and float. And you'd leave little hollandaise everywhere, little voids. So we figured out that if you use their clear, it's like an acrylic binder that's meant to go inside the mix. There's some acryl type stuff, but it's basically a clear acrylic. We started spraying that because in New Mexico, there's two reasons for it. One is they have a lot of exposed wood on the houses, vigas, wooden headers, wood frame windows. And we'd always have to mask them off like completely,
Sure.
just to spray the primer so we wouldn't get any, overspray on this wood that was finished and stained. Well, we figured out if we use the clear stuff, all we had to do is put a little round thing of tape next to where we're going to spread, and we could spray. Nobody knew because it was
Got it.
clear.
Got it.
So that's how we got into doing the clear stuff. So we always primed our brown coats,
Uh-huh.
and we started applying acrylic finish, and man, it took off. I think to this day, I think that's one of Stowe's best acrylic finish markets over stucco still in New Mexico.
Is that right?
It's just the way things are done.
Huh.
They don't do any more colored stucco. Well, I can't say any more. They do a lot of acrylic finish over stucco.
Is that right?
It was fun being
It's stuck.